Carol Burnett breaks silence. The most evil names in showbiz. For decades, America saw Carol Burnett as comedy's warmest soul, the woman who made millions laugh. Who stitched variety show magic out of kindness, wit, and grace. But behind the applause and the iconic ear-tug smile, Burnett carried a truth almost no one knew. Hollywood's golden age didn't just crown legends, it protected egos, rewarded cruelty, and punished those who dared to speak up. And Carol, even at the top of her game, wasn't spared. She endured humiliation, backroom bullying, elite hostility, and quiet sabotage from some of the industry's most powerful men. People who smiled for cameras but whispered, controlled, threatened, and belittled behind closed doors. Names the world still calls geniuses, and she privately labeled the most evil she ever encountered. Today, we uncover the list she never spoke aloud, the blacklist Hollywood never wanted you to hear. Carol Burnett's truth. Behind the smile, Carol Burnett's Hollywood reality. America's sweetheart wasn't safe in Hollywood's boys' club. As Carol Burnett rose from humble Texas roots to become television's first female sketch comedy powerhouse, she carried an armor no one could see. To the world, she was the safe laugh, the gentle heart, the woman who made a nation feel lighter after long days. But inside Hollywood's machine, one run by men who guarded power like currency, she walked a tightrope between admiration and exploitation. Burnett broke gender walls simply by existing. Every success invited praise. Every boundary she set invited backlash. In the smoky corridors of studio lots and the closed-door offices run by egos bigger than their fortunes, she learned the unspoken rule: women could shine, but only if they did not outshine the men. Gossip wasn't entertainment, it was control. Careers were built in rooms she wasn't invited into, and destroyed in whispers she wasn't meant to hear. To survive, she perfected her smile, swallowed humiliation, and protected herself the only way she could, privately remembering who had tried to break her. This wasn't revenge. Burnett never exposed them publicly, never sought to ruin reputations. Instead, she kept a mental blacklist, a quiet ledger of cruelty, arrogance, and character unmasked. It was her shield in a world where charm could turn to threat in a heartbeat, and where even the kindest woman in comedy needed to know exactly who would hurt her just to feel powerful. Carol Burnett and Joe Hamilton's marriage eventually fell apart, and the illusion of mutual respect was shattered. Joe Hamilton, the betrayal at home. The man who built her empire, then tried to control it. Before Hollywood power brokers tried to break Carol Burnett, one man had already learned how to wound her where it hurt most, at home. Joe Hamilton wasn't just her husband, he was her producer, her partner in television history, the man who helped turn the Carol Burnett show into a cultural landmark. To the outside world, they were a dream team, love, creativity, and success intertwined. But behind the curtain, power was shifting, slowly and dangerously. Hamilton understood the industry better than she did in those early years, and he used that knowledge as leverage. What began as partnerships subtly became hierarchy. Decisions once shared were suddenly final only when he said so. Finances flowed through him, influence concentrated around him, and Burnett, the face of the show and its emotional heartbeat, found herself reduced in her own kingdom. The emotional manipulation was quiet, not loud, not the explosive cruelty of a tyrant, but the sharp, cutting control of someone who believed he was owed obedience because he made the success possible. And when their marriage finally shattered, so did the illusion of mutual respect. Divorce didn't just break their family, it exposed the imbalance she had carried for years. For Burnett, this betrayal cut deeper than any Hollywood snub or backstage humiliation. It wasn't a rival or an enemy trying to hold her back, it was the man who had once promised to protect her. And that, more than anything, left the scar she never publicly displayed. Carol Burnett and Harvey Korman. Harvey Korman, humiliation behind the laughter. Comedy's golden duo, with a dark backstage secret. On screen, Carol Burnett and Harvey Korman were pure magic. Their chemistry was legendary, two comedy titans who could break each other into laughter with a single raised eyebrow. America adored them together, but behind the scenes, the man audiences saw as a lovable comedic genius often revealed a very different face. Corman's ego was no small presence. When jokes didn't land, when sketches didn't center him, or when attention drifted anywhere but his spotlight, his charm cooled into silent fury. Crew members felt it first, his icy mood, his dismissiveness. But for Carol, it turned into emotional punishment, cold shoulders, tantrums disguised as creative frustration, and quiet moments designed to make her question her place on her own stage. Burnett tried to rise above it, until the day she couldn't. One private confrontation changed everything. No audience, no laugh track, just truth. She looked at him and famously said, "If you ever treat me like that again, you can leave this show." It was the moment the balance shifted. Corman eventually returned with humility, and later admitted regret over how he behaved. The lesson lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. Even the funniest people in the room can be the cruelest. Genius isn't a shield for arrogance. And kindness, the very thing Burnett embodied, isn't weakness. In a world where comedians wore smiles as armor, Carol proved that sometimes the bravest punchline is standing up for your own dignity. Marlon Brando, Hollywood royalty with ice in his veins. The charmer who turned cruel when the spotlight wasn't his. Marlon Brando wasn't just a movie star, he was Hollywood royalty. A force of nature who reshaped acting and commanded every room he walked into. His genius was undeniable, his presence, magnetic, but for those who crossed his path without the armor of ego or status, Brando could be chilling, and Carol Burnett experienced that frost firsthand. To Brando, power wasn't something the industry gave him, it was something he expected. Legends worshipped him, journalists excused him, and peers trembled around him. But when Carol, a woman and a comic, in a field he considered lighter than his own, encountered him, she didn't meet the rebel icon the world adored. She met the man who could weaponize silence, sarcasm, and arrogance like tools sharpened in private. The incident that stayed with her wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't need to be. Brando's cruelty came wrapped in charm and delivered with precision. A dismissive remark, a cold brush off, a moment designed not to argue with her, but to diminish her. It was humiliation disguised as humor. Superiority masquerading as sophistication. To someone else, it might have seemed small. To Carol, it was the unmistakable sting of being reminded she wasn't part of the ruling class of Hollywood, at least not in his eyes. Brando represented a pattern the industry protected: charismatic men who mistook brilliance for the right to bruise others. In a world where charm could melt screens but freeze hearts, Carol Burnett saw the truth beneath the legend: talent doesn't erase cruelty. Sometimes, it hides it. Cary Grant was Hollywood elegance incarnate. Cary Grant, charm with a calculated edge. Hollywood's perfect gentleman, until the cameras stopped. Cary Grant was Hollywood elegance incarnate, sharp tuxedos, effortless wit, the man who made sophistication look effortless. To audiences, he was the definition of grace. To insiders, that charm didn't always reach everyone, especially those he deemed beneath his carefully curated social tier. And when Carol Burnett crossed paths with him, she discovered the truth behind the polished exterior: charm can be a weapon, and exclusion can cut deeper than insults. Grant didn't need to slam doors or raise his voice. His power was subtler: a glance that dismissed, a smile that never warned, a tone that reminded you of your ranking in the room. Burnett, despite her success, felt the iciness reserved for those he didn't view as equals. The humiliation was social, not theatrical, the kind meant to sting quietly, the kind that lingered long after the conversation ended. A joke ignored, a greeting brushed aside, a presence treated as invisible not because of talent, but because of hierarchy. Hollywood loved hierarchy as much as it loved glamour. Who sat at elite dinner tables? Who was greeted first at galas? Whose voice mattered? All spoke louder than award speeches. And Grant, for all his screen magic, upheld that invisible caste system with precision. Burnett never publicly criticized him, she didn't need to. The silence in her memory told the story. Cruelty isn't always loud. Sometimes it's delivered with a smile, wrapped in elegance, and justified by status. Behind Hollywood's most polished gentleman stood a man who knew exactly how to make others feel small, and Carol never forgot it. Lorne Michaels, the gatekeeper who shut the door. the man who refused to let a legend in. In modern comedy, few names carry as much power as Lorne Michaels, the architect of Saturday Night Live, the kingmaker of sketch comedy, the man whose approval could launch, or stall, a career. But for Carol Burnett, a woman who carved the very path SNL walked years later, that door never opened. Instead, she faced the kind of exclusion that hurts more than insults: erasure. When Burnett reached out, when tributes were proposed, when a moment to honor her legacy arose, Michaels didn't just decline, he dismissed. She wasn't part of his comedy club. She wasn't invited onto the SNL stage as a comedic titan. Even though she paved the road for that very format, the message wasn't spoken, but it was loud. You may have built this foundation, but we don't acknowledge you here. This wasn't personal in the emotional way her earlier wounds were. This was corporate ego wrapped in cool detachment. The new guard refusing to honor the pioneer who made their success possible. Hollywood has always protected its myths, and one of its most persistent is that genius begins where youth begins. To honor Burnett would mean admitting the comedy empire wasn't born inside Studio 8H, and Michaels wasn't ready to surrender that crown. Carol never lashed out. She didn't beg for recognition or publicly criticize him. She didn't need to. The silence from SNL became louder than applause, a reminder of how Hollywood rewrites history by ignoring those it owes the most. And for Burnett, that exclusion wasn't anger, it was disappointment from someone who knew she lit the torch first. The Quiet Book, Burnett's private Hollywood blacklist. Keeping score without losing dignity. Carol Burnett never made her blacklist public. It wasn't about revenge, publicity, or career theatrics, it was about survival. In an industry where gossip spreads faster than laughter, where power dynamics can crush a career overnight, she quietly cataloged the betrayals, humiliations, and calculated cruelties she endured. Her list wasn't a weapon aimed at others, it was a shield for herself. A mental ledger to navigate Hollywood's treacherous terrain. Every name held a story, from spouses who weaponized love, co-stars who humiliated her, to legends who dismissed or erased her achievements. By keeping these experiences private, Burnett maintained her dignity, preserving both personal and professional relationships while recognizing patterns of behavior that demanded caution. This approach allowed her to protect her career and emotional well-being without descending into bitterness. Unlike a smear campaign, which seeks to destroy a person publicly, Burnett's private record functioned as a compass. It guided her decisions about collaborations, negotiations, and trust. It reminded her who respected her, who wielded power responsibly, and who could not be relied upon. In the cutthroat world of old Hollywood, secrecy was survival. Every observation, every discreet note, was a lesson in strategy, resilience, and moral clarity. Her private blacklist is a testament to a rare kind of wisdom, understanding human nature deeply, seeing cruelty for what it is, and protecting oneself without compromising integrity. It wasn't just a list, it was her survival manual, written with grace and foresight in a world that often rewarded ruthlessness over talent. Legacy, strength behind the golden curtain. Thriving with grace in a world that tested her. Carol Burnett's career wasn't just a story of talent and laughter, it was a testament to resilience. Behind the golden curtain of Hollywood glamour, she faced betrayal, humiliation, and the subtle cruelties of a male-dominated industry. Yet, through every challenge, she maintained her integrity, her humor, and her generosity. She didn't just survive, she thrived, building a legacy that blended artistry with moral courage. Her experiences resonate strongly with modern conversations about workplace abuse and the Me Too movement. Burnett navigated power imbalances long before such topics became public discourse, showing that it is possible to protect oneself while continuing to shine. She witnessed firsthand how charm, fame, and status could mask cruelty, yet she chose a path of quiet strength rather than public confrontation, proving that dignity can be its own form of resistance. In many ways, her silence paved the way for future generations. By maintaining her integrity, she preserved her story while allowing others to speak their truth in later years. Carol Burnett's legacy is about more than Emmy Awards or unforgettable sketches. It's about demonstrating that success does not have to come at the expense of humanity. Her kindness, courage, and unwavering professionalism serve as a blueprint for navigating an industry that often rewards ruthlessness. In a world where talent alone rarely guarantees safety, Carol Burnett's life shows the power of combining brilliance with character. Her real triumph lies in teaching us that grace under pressure, and strength behind the laughter, is a legacy that endures far beyond the spotlight. The woman who refused to break. Grace under fire. Carol Burnett's enduring power. Carol Burnett's story isn't just one of laughter and unforgettable performances, it's a story of resilience, courage, and quiet fortitude in the face of relentless challenges. Behind the smiles and sketches was a woman navigating a world stacked against her: betrayal from loved ones, humiliation from colleagues, harassment from those in power, and exclusion from opportunities she rightfully earned. Yet through it all, she refused to break. Her true power lay not in retaliation or vindication, but in grace under fire. She maintained her dignity, protected her artistic legacy, and continued to inspire generations of performers with her humor and professionalism. Burnett's private blacklist, her silent observations of Hollywood's darker side, wasn't about revenge, it was about understanding, survival, and asserting control over her own narrative in a world that often sought to rewrite it. Her legacy challenges us to rethink how we view icons. Talent and fame are only part of the story. Courage, compassion, and moral clarity define the measure of greatness. Carol Burnett showed that standing firm in one's values, even when faced with power, elitism, and cruelty, is a triumph in its own right. In the end, her life reminds us that sometimes the brightest stars shine not just because of their talent, but because they survived the darkest rooms. Through adversity, she became more than a comedy legend, she became a symbol of integrity, resilience, and the enduring strength of the human spirit.